Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Ray Saldana, National President and CEO of Communities in Schools. Here we are with another Community Chats. And again, this is a way for us within the network that we serve across the country with leaders and affiliates, site coordinators, preparing for the season of back to school. And obviously, this is a different kind of back to school than any of us are used to, whether we are parents or educators, leaders of nonprofits. This is a completely new space for us. We know that millions of students are returning to school this fall, some in person, while others will be learning full-time or part-time at home. And there are lots of implications for what that means to be learning at home and what home is like for some of the students, specifically some of the students we serve, or the majority of the students that we serve at Communities in Schools. And because of the pandemic and the disruption in learning, they will be returning to school with a greater level of physical, social, and emotional needs. Something we know a lot about at Communities in Schools that for the last 40 years, we have really just poured ourselves into around making sure that we're meeting those physical, social, and emotional needs. And that is particularly true for students of color. And for folks who don't get a snapshot of the statistics of the students that we serve, about 80% of the students that we serve are Black and brown, who faced existing educational inequities even before the pandemic. And the pandemic, which we know happened in March, was really only a portion of what now our students are facing, thinking about what their lives are like within context. So to serve our students in schools and now beyond the classroom, we will require our CIS network to re-engage students and their families in new ways. So today, we wanted to invite three of our executive directors to discuss how COVID-19 and the racial reckoning in our country, and just let me pause there, how that has had an impact on our students of color. And I say pause there because we unfortunately are living real time, a reckoning that has gone on for several generations in some homes, at some dinner tables, understanding why it is that we continue to see what we see, whether it's on social media or on the news, that we have to see people getting shot in the back by law enforcement. And disproportionately, those people who are being shot are Black men. And so we want to talk about how that has an impact, not just on the everyday interactions or debate or politics, but really the context of the students that we are serving. And as an organization that is focused on the needs of these students, again, physically, social, and the emotional needs of these students, we're here to talk with leaders who are leading our local affiliates, and we get to do a little bit of a tour across the country. We have leaders today from Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, and Los Angeles, California. But here to kick us off for the conversation, I want you to welcome CIS of Atlanta's CEO, Frank Brown. Frank, are you there?
I'm here, Ray. How are you?
Frank, I'm doing great. Even more that I get to have an opportunity to get to check in with you in Atlanta. So I should ask, how are you doing? Tell me how things are going.
It's a tough day, Ray. When I think about my heart and my prayers go out to Mr. Jacob Blake's family, Wisconsin. I thought this would be a much more joyous environment, but our country has some serious issues, and I know we're going to dive into it. But I want to start off by saying my prayers and go to that family. We had Rashard Brooks down here, and I would let you guys know that his daughter is actually on our caseload now. So that hit pretty close to home. But other than that, we're very enthusiastic about the start of the school year and anxious to give you some insights on what we're doing down here. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for your leadership, Ray, for putting this together. You know, leadership is very tough these days, but to have someone like you who I reached out to and you were straight up and down with me, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank, you know, we're just grateful to have you as part of not just this conversation, but just the everyday work that's been going on the last several years that you've been working as the leader of CIS in Atlanta, and just leading by, you know, the sheer passion, the strength and experience that you have. So I want to get into that. So if we can, let's just jump into a few questions so the audience can hear from you and hear about some of your experiences. So let me just sort of set the table. You know, first of all, CIS Atlanta is the first CIS. There was 100 students that we started with in Atlanta that created Communities in Schools as we know it today. So really, when we talk about context, that's important context here when we're talking about the fact that we're reaching into history to have this conversation. We're also reaching into a lot of what you've and you've described as somebody who knows Atlanta inside and out. Like, this is also a city that has suffered even before the pandemic with inequality. So just speaking to COVID-19, our youth are dealing with so many obstacles, so much uncertainty. You all have gone above and beyond these challenging times. You're connecting students with students in different ways. You're actually connecting them with devices, to Wi-Fi, educational materials, extra food in many cases. So all these things, I know you're reaching out because there's an emotional web of support, especially when we see things like we saw happening in Wisconsin. So the question is, what does that look like for Black and Brown students, and how have you been able to specifically support their fight for racial and social justice?
Right. Thank you for that question. It's very pertinent at this time. The first thing we have to do is take care of our most important asset, and that's with our site coordinators. The majority of our site coordinators are African-American and Hispanic. So we can't ask those important assets to go out here and do a service, and they're dealing with financial and mental issues and emotional issues. Some of them lost family members to COVID. Some of them were infected with COVID. So I had to start inside the house and make sure that we had a staff that was engaged and ready for this Herculean task of trying to implement this model virtually, basically. So we took care of our staff, right, with a good bonus, making sure their benefits wasn't cut. We didn't cut one staff member down here. And we also trained them. We had 2 weeks worth of training going into this year. And it was around social and emotional development. All of my staff are trained in social and emotional trainings and background. So we are coming to this as first citizens of the city of Atlanta, knowing that we have children who look like the students we serve. So we had to get our staff right. And then our staff is now prepared to go about doing this work in a much more informed, intentional, and an emotionally charged and balanced way.
I think about the burden of responsibility on leaders who are at the heads of nonprofits, but specifically CIS, because we've gotten to the point of having such trusted relationships with these students. And what I know to be true about COVID-19 is that it was not a equal opportunity disruptor. I mean, it was Black and Latino students with death tolls higher on average if you look across the country, but if you zoom in to specific communities, how is that coupled with racial relations and police brutality in Atlanta and other cities? Because we have the opportunity to be with you as a leader, in what ways you as a Black man educating and addressing social unrest in your local affiliates?
Well, one, being authentic when I speak out on these issues. I think that leaders must be authentic. You must really speak from a place of passion and a place of truth. So really trying to be an example for my children. I have 2 young boys who I'm trying to raise in this world, and we had to sit there and watch Mr. Blake's shooting yesterday, and it was a very difficult conversation. So one, being a good example and a role model for the children and the staff that we serve, and 2, speaking authentically and making sure that the voice that's out there, that they hear us and they know that CIS is not just an organization that's on the sideline, but we're actually essential workers in trying to connect some of the most disconnected kids in this country, especially here in Atlanta, the income inequality capital of the country, to these vital services. As you know, Ray, there were studies that showed that our babies will fall almost 10 months behind due to not being connected to the internet. So the first thing we've been doing is chasing down the hot list of kids who never actually connected in the spring when COVID first broke out. We're in crisis mode. We had a significant amount of kids who, due to the fact that they didn't have laptops or Wi-Fi, never connected in the spring. That we know that they will have. So for us, we've been on the ground, just like you said, getting laptops, Wi-Fi, and more importantly, we got 100 college kids we're supporting now, Ray. Me and you've had conversations. For us, high school is not enough. Mm-hmm. We cannot be proud as a network. And I think I've challenged you, and me and you've had conversations about the network embracing what we're doing down here in Atlanta. Like you said, if we started this, we should be the innovators of what this model does. And we believe that high school is not enough for poor Black and brown kids. So we believe that every student we serve must go to college, to technical school, the military, or start a business if they have a talent. And that's the only way we believe, those pathways, we believe they'll become full participants in the American dream. That's a homeowner, a taxpayer, and someone with better educational options for their children. So that's what we've been doing, really trying to get our babies back from college and also getting them back to college now. So we deal from third grade all the way up to seniors in college, and that's how we're approaching this work in a holistic way.
You know, Frank, as you describe all of the work that goes into, the model, it's like it's the model plus. Like, you all are innovating as you're seeing the world come at you, and I'm just thinking about how, there are just so many things that we have to be ready for in this new school year, and I want to just kind of get a sense from you how you've been able to assist parents and academic leaders as they prepare to educate students virtually or in person this school year. You've described some of that, but you're going to be, if you're doing your work right, teachers can teach and principals can lead their schools because you can handle all those other components you just described. So tell us about that work.
Well, the first thing is you have to listen to our customers. So we have in Atlanta, we serve 4 different school districts. We're across 56 schools. So we have 4 different customers who have different needs and different requests. So for us, is listening to the customers. So we've been in close consultation with all of our superintendents and all of their senior teams to make sure that we're hearing, and the hot list is what we've been hearing from our school district partners, trying to find the kids who never connected. That's been at the top of their minds, trying to make sure that we just get a baseline of kids back connected to school. And more importantly, our parents. For example, we had a situation the other day when we were doing home visits, just checking on them at the beginning of the year, where a principal out in Fulton County said that she noticed that a lot of her kids didn't have masks. My staff didn't just sit on the sideline. We went and we showed it on our social media. We went out and bought over 900 masks for that school. So we're doing a lot of things like protective gear. It's hard to get sanitizers in some of these communities. It's hard to get paper towels and all the things that we kind of in everyday life take for granted. So we're just trying to meet basic needs. Just for example, Ray, since we started giving out emergency assistance in March when COVID broke out, really, went to another level and schools were sent home. We've given out over $120,000 since March up until June. We've helped over 25,000 families here in Atlanta. We've given over 40,000 meals, given out over 1,000 hygiene kits. And more importantly, we've helped over 75 of our alumni who were stranded. Think about this, Ray. If you're poor in Atlanta and you happen to get a football scholarship, we got 13 kids, some of them who might be future NFL draft prospects in the next year, this spring, and they couldn't even get home. Think about it. They got full rides. They're at some of the biggest schools, Clemson, Alabama, and we had to go and get some of these babies and pick them up because just because you got the scholarship, all the other things are not being met. And you see how college football was treating our babies. We're worried about the babies we have there who are at these schools that are closed, but the football season is still going to go ahead. So, we're up 12 months a year, 7 days a week down here, really trying to keep our hands on all these babies we're serving from college all the way down to third grade.
Yeah, Frank, you are describing all that in between, all that stuff that other duties as assigned when we think about the site coordinators, the educators in the classrooms who are working alongside. And so I think we have time for one more question. I want to touch on this because it's important. It's that, I think as an organization, we've made statements and commitments to concepts that a lot of people are talking about now. But this was 2 years ago that we started talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. I think even though we've been on this journey, I'm proud of some of the progress we've made. We've talked about leadership, we've talked about boards, but there's undoubtedly a lot more work to be done. Where do you see gaps and how do you see our students and our alumni helping us on this journey?
Well, just from a CIS affiliate network, I think we must have more diversity in CIS leadership. The people who actually run affiliates. I know I have several colleagues on here. We have a lot of talent, a lot of diverse talent in this network, and really bringing that out and showing the diversity and the richness of the leadership talent we have, and also making an effort and really pushing, boards across this country to give people of color a chance. Ray, you're a breath of fresh air. Your leadership brings to this organization. More importantly, you're one of the kids who benefited from this, and that's what we're doing down here. I tell my kids all the time, if I run an organization $6 to $7 million, you should be running a $20 million organization. We've taken them to the New York Stock Exchange with your predecessor, Dale. We've taken them to NASDAQ, LA, and all we do is to expose them and to make sure that they see what is possible, and we help them and support them by whatever means is necessary to get to that goal.
Well, Frank, if this is some people's first exposure to you across the network who are watching this, I hope they'll reach out to you because you've got so much to teach, whether it's around alumni engagement, the work you are already doing. I think that's resonating with a lot of folks who may be listening in who are also leaders. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, I just always enjoy your perspective and your passion. So please stay safe, stay well. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ray, for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you on these issues in the future.
Thank you, Frank. All right, well, so as we discussed, COVID-19 has provided us with a lot of lessons and here at CIS and how we address the needs of our students. And so here to discuss ways that we re-engage, recover, and reimagine. Those are 3 R's that I think a lot of organizations are using, but we are trying to put action behind them here in the 2021 academic school year. I want us to all now take a flight to CIS of Memphis, and CEO Sonji Branch is joining us. Sonji, are you there?
How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing okay. It's good to get to talk to you. It's good to see your face. It's good that one of our newest leaders out at Memphis is joining us for this conversation. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Grappling with a lot of things that are happening still around our country, things that we thought we would not see yet again, but here we are at another moment where we're grieving the loss of the death of someone very senselessly.
And Sonji, I think it's important that we just kind of reemphasize, like there are folks who grapple with this, and some folks who can sort of see it as a passing by news story, but others who really have to sit with it. And I think as an organization, we have to sit with it because this is the world that our students are going into and inheriting. So I want to just thank you for being a strong leader in our organization and for joining us today. And I want to jump in to sort of continue that theme of the conversation. So as a Black female CEO, what has witnessing, firsthand the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and the national social unrest on our Black and Brown students taught you, and how have you personally dealt with the long overdue racial reckoning that we're seeing happening throughout our country?
Yeah, such a timely question. So I am a Gen Xer. I was born in 1968, which was technically the end of the civil rights movement. And what this has sparked for me is a very timely reminder that in the fight for civil rights in America, Black women have always been at the forefront, from the Underground Railroad to leading freedom rides, and even standing up for women's rights to vote. And so I'm reminded of how important it is as an African American, as a Black woman leader in the nonprofit sector, to continue to take a stand, and I think even as we think about where we are as a country in preparation for the November elections, Black women represent the population that has been most consistent in the voting as a voting bloc. And so there's so many things that are kind of coming top of mind for me, which have informed how I now embrace leadership at this moment. And I think it's also worth noting that, as a woman of color, we are oftentimes at this intersection of various forms of oppression, and that empowers us in a way to lead with more empathy and to lead with more strength and perseverance. And so that has been my resolve as we continue to witness the social unrest in our country right now.
Thank you for just laying that out. I think it's a reminder to those who are listening, who are part of the network, that even as head of a nonprofit, or you're a site coordinator in a school, you're working with students, you can bring your whole self to that. And that means that when you are describing the history and talking about the presence of their story within the struggle that this country continues to fight for equal justice and equity, it just reminds us that that's part of our charge is understanding the context with which we work and the students and the maze that they navigate. And so now I want to talk a little bit about the students. In what ways does the CIS of Memphis plan to continue and expand upon its programming to assist with the current needs and the remediation even of students and families during and then post the crisis here?
So I've challenged my team to kind of think to shift our paradigms and how we're thinking about this work. And we've somewhat embraced this theory or this practice of strategic resiliency. And so when we think about the work that we do and how we've been able to pivot just in this short period of time earlier this year when schools closed due to the pandemic, we know that we are a resilient group of people, of a resilient group of, professionals. But now, how do we couple that resilience with strategy? So we know that in order to help to, mitigate some of the impact that our students are bringing back to school now, because school has started here in Memphis, we've got to double down our efforts on social emotional supports for students. And so that's what the current needs require of us. But when we think about, again, strategic resilience, how are we navigating the turbulent times that we're in right now while thinking forward? And so as we shift to think about, what does this look like in the future, we know that we have to really pay a lot pay more attention to the last part of the mission of this organization, the achieve in life part. We've done a great job with building relationships with students in schools, ensuring that they're there, but what then happens after graduation? And so for us, we are strengthening our partnerships and tapping into funds that allow us to work with students beyond high school, to literally embed student support specialists or career specialists in some of our college campuses, so that, again, that support network is there for them to help them to navigate those challenges, which are very different than what they've experienced, obviously, in the traditional K through 12 setting. And I would like to point out, there is so much value in lived experiences and how our lived experiences shape our leadership. And so 2 weeks ago, my husband and I had the privilege, I would say, of taking our son to college. And my son chose to follow in my footsteps and attend my alma mater, Tennessee State University. And I was struck by, when we got my son to campus, I was struck by how different things were for between the time that I was there and now him starting his journey there. And just to paint the picture for you, when I was attending school there, we had 6 dormitories on the college campus, 3 dorms for males, 3 dorms for females. Now there are 8 dormitories on the campus, but only 2 of those dorms are for males. And so it was a stark, literal gut punch for me to see how over the course of these years, these decades, the enrollment for males in college has decreased so precipitously. Now, we know that, as a practitioner in this work, but what it has fueled for me is this additional charge to our team to really reimagine or rethink how we're approaching this post-secondary support for students, and how we might even need to examine our own implicit biases with how we select students for certain programs, for internships, for targeted college and career readiness programming. We often gravitate to females because we are largely, demographically, we have more females obviously doing this work than we do males. But how do we help to, shift the paradigm with our staff members so that they are more intentional about targeting supports for males?
Sonji, I think you've framed this up in the right way, in that how are we using this crisis to think strategically around the way that we are delivering for our students? Because we know that takes so much resilience, and then you've already peered into the future, and I think grasped what a lot of our affiliates are thinking is like, how do we work even beyond to work on that succeed in life? So I appreciate you elevating that. I want to get to a question here, which is, because CIS of Memphis is still on the front lines of this pandemic, working to assist Memphis families with much needed resources, can you share with us a framework for how you and your team are mitigating the long-term social, emotional, and economic consequences of the collective trauma from COVID-19?
Sure. And so, I have to say the beauty of being a part of this national network is that we have the opportunity and privilege to learn from other leaders and affiliates across the country who have experienced natural disasters that have interrupted, the traditional school setting in their respective cities. So we're able to lean on those experiences kind of to help to shape what we're doing here locally and what that means for the network. And so when we think think about where we've been and what we've learned over the past few months with that spring semester of interruption of instructional time, in the classrooms, we've been able to hone in on what we learned then, fine-tuning this distance support model that we were able to implement, so to address the current needs and crises. But we know that going into this school year, that our work is really going to be focused largely on crisis intervention, crisis mitigation. And so it's not obviously going to look like it has looked in years past. Our CIS model implementation is going to be very different, again, focusing on the most immediate needs and crisis needs of our students and families. But when we think about the long-term impact of this pandemic, this is how, again, we have to reimagine CIS of Memphis. When we became a part of this network, so much of our work was focused on attendance, improving attendance. And so where we find ourselves now is just, as you've named all of these factors, we're not necessarily seen quite yet as an organization that is tackling these issues, because we've been in this very specific lane of attendance. And so this is our opportunity. This year is our opportunity to really elevate the awareness of what we truly do and the broad depth and breadth of communities and schools and the work that we do here in Memphis. And so we're looking forward to digging in even more intentionally with our school leaders, with our district leaders, to elevate, again, the vast, all-encompassing aspect of this work, so that we can, have more opportunities to be at the table where funding decisions are being made around broader community-wide initiatives that will tackle all of these, inequities that we're facing in our community. So that's what we're really looking for, this reimagining, redesign of the implementation of our work here in Memphis.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I think that's a common thread we hear throughout a lot of the leaders from the network, is that we need to reimagine if we're going to be able to step up for parents, to step up for the teachers we work alongside with. And you've just described a sort of a reimagining of that makes us a value add to the schools that we're working with. It's not just, can we get students into the schools, or in many cases what we've been called to do, which is to get them to show up on the computer screen with device and connectivity. It's, can we make sure that we're checking the temperature of students in a different kind of way, social emotional connections. And I think that's just really great to hear, because it's happening in a place like Memphis, which you've been leading. And you're, I think, in your first, you're just over a year now at
so no, this is my 6th year. And so,
okay,
right, our 6th year of operations in Memphis, and my 6th year also leading the work here. So we're still relatively newbies in this network.
Yeah, if I think about 6 years at Memphis, and then close to 40 plus years in Atlanta, where we rank, makes us just a really rich network with, as you described, folks to lean on. And I hope that more of this happens between affiliate leaders who are willing to share. And I'm so grateful that you were able to spend some time with us talking about that reimagining, how we're connecting with parents in new ways. And so I want to say thank you for joining us today. Really, it's just a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's definitely been great. And I appreciate my colleagues joining me in this effort.
Absolutely, Sonji. Well, stay safe, and we will continue to catch up.
All right.
No doubt about that. Okay, bye, Sonji.
Bye.
So now, of course, CIS helps students re-engage in learning and recover, again, from this new kind of trauma. It's an emotional trauma that doesn't necessarily present itself on our students readily. We do have to reimagine the learning environment so that they're safe, effective, and equitable. And we want to continue to address connectivity issues with distance learning and student advocacy. And so joining me, last but not least, to touch on this topic is Elmer Roldan, who is the executive director at CIS of Los Angeles. Elmer, are you there? Hey, good to talk to you. Good to see you. Elmer, how are you? How are you in LA?
The pleasure is all mine. And, LA keeps it pushing. There's a lot of work to be done in Los Angeles, especially at a time like this.
Well, I got to say, Elmer is one of our newest executive directors, the first person of color to lead CIS of Los Angeles. So I'm just proud in all kinds of ways. But for folks who want to get to know a little bit more about Elmer, one thing I really like is that his background is in community organizing, if I'm describing that correctly. And what a time to be, somebody who can speak up and be a voice for community, and now be leading one of our national nonprofits. So I'm just grateful to have you on the call, Elmer.
Oh, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's hop right into it. So I want to say that having these types of conversations are needed, but often they're challenging for many. So how can leaders like yourself take a stance and remain, again, advocating voice for students on topics that, that may seem controversial to those who don't face the hardships of reality that many of our students do each day, such as violence or lack of income and racial inequity? I know you've led from the front. And so I just want to ask you how you are grappling with it, how you as a leader make those kinds of decisions.
Sure, I think that's a great question. I think it starts with giving a voice to the people who have the most experience, and really validating the experience of parents and students who are the ones that are often most impacted by policies inside of schools. Very often we lean on the expertise of people who have advanced degrees, who have spent a lot of time learning about what our families experience on a daily basis. And so I think for organizations like Communities in Schools of Los Angeles, we truly value the experience of staff who often have walked in the same shoes as our students have. And so we want to make sure that as we carry the work forward, that parents and students are uplifted in the work that we do, and that as we think about our programming, as we think about the work that is happening externally, that we recognize that these families are the ones that are ultimately benefiting from policies that are positive or being negatively impacted whenever those policies go against the needs of those families.
Yeah, and Elmer, this is something that I think is to the benefit of the audience. You've had some experience prior to joining CIS of Los Angeles with LA Unified, and I think in that example, like, what does that look like for somebody who wants to advocate? You all have eradicated, I think, what was it, school suspension that led to some statistics that I thought were worthy of talking about today. What was that?
That's correct. Yeah. So in 2013, LA Unified took a stand. Really as a result of student organizing and parent organizing that said that they were going to do away with suspensions and expulsions, and really we're going to approach school culture from a place where it humanizes young people, particularly boys of color, and looking at Black boys and how Black boys are often on the receiving end of these punitive laws. Most recently, LA Unified took a position around school policing in response to the climate in the nation and the organizing that has been happening for such a long time, calling attention to the role that police play inside our schools, but also in our communities.
Yeah, now I appreciate you sort of walking through that. I know I read that in your background, and I really just wanted to make sure to elevate it for those folks who are listening to it today. So another thing about like CIS of Los Angeles, they've provided support and case management for now about 1,000 LA families, some of which have children with special needs. But what has COVID-19 taught you about how to address the current and the existing needs of families who are at a disadvantage with at-home schooling, such as students for whom English is not the native language? Talk to us about how hard it is to work with students with those kinds of disadvantages.
Sure. Well, I got to tell you that COVID has been hard even for people who do speak English, and even for parents who have degrees at home. What COVID has done is it has shined a light on the challenges that our families are truly facing as a result of inequality. That, we've known that schools really play a dual role, the role of educating children, but also they play the role of feeding children. They play the role of ensuring that children are healthy and they have their basic needs met. And as schools closed as a result of COVID, you saw families finding themselves often feeling isolated because those resources were not as readily available to them. We've heard a lot about LA Unified taking a really strong position around feeding families, and taking a risk, because we know that the federal rules say that you can feed children with school lunches, but you can't feed adults. And LA Unified decided that they wanted to feed families at the risk of losing funding. And I think that's very telling about the priorities of the district at this time. And we stood with them on that. And then in that same conversation, talking about the need of connectivity and providing devices for students was a big deal. Ensuring that students had computers that could connect to the internet, but also having the internet itself. And it raises big issues about the lack of bandwidth in our neighborhoods, the fact that often children are having to do their homework on cell phones or sharing one device across multiple siblings. And so the digital divide has never been as wide as it is today. It hasn't been as front and center as it is today. And it really is the topic of conversation today as we talk about distance learning.
Yeah, and for folks who are watching this, if you don't follow Elmer on social media and Instagram, you should, because he talks about the digital divide, but he is out there practically as a one-man wrecking crew trying to bridge it himself, and done one of the more innovative approaches where he even got some sponsorship to get headphones for students, noise canceling headphones, because of the environment for learning where it's there's a family living in 1-2 bedrooms or less. And I just thought it was so innovative. And I want to sort of ask a question that speaks to, like, we serve in communities all across the country, but in your community, there's a particular conversation that's going on that I want to ask you about, which is that in addition to the recent rallies, there's been also this support of defunding police departments across America. Another necessary conversation that comes out of this national dialogue, again, about police brutality and racism, is about the presence of police acting as school resource officers in the school building. So how has that played out? How are you all grappling with it as an organization? Talk to us in your experience.
Sure. Yeah, so Communities in Schools of Los Angeles took a strong position on a policy that was proposed that would have defunded LA Unified School Police Force by 90%. That policy did not pass. Instead, the board voted on an alternative plan that reduced the budget by 25 million, a budget that is right now 70 million. So they cut it by about 35%. And we believe that it was necessary. We believe that it elevates the question about why schools require police and what roles police plays, particularly in communities of color. For me, I think that it's important to elevate the fact that you can get rid of people carrying badges and guns inside of school and still have a culture of punishment and policing inside of schools. I'm a product of LA Unified, and as a brown kid who got in trouble in school, I can tell you that I was impacted by zero tolerance policies, and I'm often surprised to hear educators who have critiques of restorative justice, who feel that their hands are being tied when you get rid of suspensions, when you get rid of expulsions, when you get rid of opportunity transfers. And to me, it really speaks to a culture that LA Unified, like many other school districts, have responded to in the nation, where punishment really was the way that you remain in control of the situation. Many organizers have looked at this issue, and I think it speaks to the culture. In 2005, organizations came together and they rallied to ask LA Unified to make it mandatory for all students to be prepared to go to college, so that at graduation, every student should have the classes that they need to at least be able to apply for a 4-year university. To me, the people that critique getting rid of school suspensions and expulsions are the same people who back then said that not all children have what it takes to go to college, that not all students want to go to a 4-year, but that some students need to be mechanics and and do blue collar roles. And the question that we ask those people are you talking about your children that deserve to be suspended from schools? Are you talking about your children, the ones that shouldn't be prepared to go to college? Because often they're talking about Black and brown kids in poor communities when they speak about the all kids not deserving to be given the same opportunities as all students. And the way that I see it is that communities and schools of Los Angeles, just like the rest of the network, we are the organizations that step in for those students that are often not seen as the ones who will eventually end up in college, or the ones that don't deserve the attention that are often ignored. The way that I look at it is children serve as fire alarms, smoke detectors. Smoke detectors tell you that there's smoke in the home, that tells you that there's a risk that your home may burn down. Well, children play that role in school. So when children come to school and there's a disruption issue, or there's challenges, children are signaling that there's something going on in their home, or there's something going on in their community, or maybe it's something that's going on in the schools. And so when we choose to push those children out or punish them because they're signaling that there's a challenge, we're saying that we are okay with the culture that separates children by those who deserve to be educated and deserve a shot at life, and those who don't. And so for us, I think it's very important to take a position and elevate the voice of students in these circumstances, even when the system is set up in a way where it believes that the best way to educate children is to patrol them and control them at the same time that they're supposed to be in an environment where education is supposed to be happening.
Elmer, I think that's just a great articulation of what it sounds like in the heads of leaders who are trying to grapple with this intersection of policy and my work to advocate for the kids that I work with at communities and schools, and how some of that policy, whether we want to admit it or not, either explicitly or implicitly, is having a disproportionate impact on the students that we serve, students of color, Black or brown. You've talked about predominantly, the facts bore out Black men or Black boys who were being disciplined, and just speaks again to, if we're truly trying to live up to the role of supporting these students, it's really disentangling those kinds of levels of discrimination built into some policy that is impacting our students. So thank you for that. I know we only have a minute or two here. I want to get to this last question because I think it is worth discussing. You are, again, the first person of color to lead CIS of Los Angeles. I want to ask you, does that come with any challenges, opportunities? Talk to me about your experience.
I think it comes with both. I appreciate my my predecessors who have led the organization in its 13-year history and have ensured that the organization is successful and well-rooted in Los Angeles. And now I've been given the opportunity to steer the organization through this next chapter. I heard you say earlier that I'm a one-man show, and I got to tell you that it's definitely not possible to do it alone. I have a tremendous team. And we work together. We have a tremendous board as well that stands behind the vision to be a more social justice minded organization. And our board rolls up their sleeves every single day to ensure that they're supporting us in every way possible, including supporting our vision that Communities and Schools of Los Angeles has to be an organization that stands by our values of supporting students in every way, even if it means taking a position on something challenging. And I do think it comes with a lot of responsibility. I think people look to you when you're a person of color, a leader, especially in the nonprofit world, and they expect more of you. I think the standards are different. And I think that it is incumbent of us to know when to ask for help, to know when, what our limitations are, but also to bring our lived experiences, because I am one of the kids that, that we serve. I mean, I am a product of an organization that, looked at me when I was 13 years old and, and they said, here's someone that, we believe that we should invest in. Even when I was I'm an immigrant to this country. I've lived in South Central my entire life. And, I was an okay student, but I was an immigrant. So I didn't see a path beyond graduating high school. So, at school, I wasn't one of the ones that was selected for the special programs. I wasn't particularly given the attention that I saw some of my more studious peers receive. And so organizations like Communities and Schools to me step in and provided the support that has gotten me to where I am today. They taught me about organizing. They taught me about the movements of young people and creating solutions for the communities that we live in and the schools that we attend. And so I'm truly, I feel blessed that I've been given an opportunity where I'm able to bring that experience with me, and I'm able to elevate the voices of my colleagues on the team who, again, share similar experiences to mine.
Elmer, thank you so much for bringing who you are, your truth, what you believe in to this conversation. I think it helps leaders in the affiliates all across the network understand how they can push themselves, how they can think about the work beyond just the terms of like, let's get through the school year, even though that is enough, feels like enough on our plate. So thank you again for joining us. We wish you the best in this school year. It's going to be a tough one, but this has been an important conversation and one that undoubtedly will need to continue in our schools. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you for doing this.
All right. Well, I want to thank the folks who joined us today. Frank Brown from CIS of Atlanta, Elmer Roldan from CIS of Los Angeles, and Sonji Branch from CIS of Memphis. We've gone now all the way across the country. And I want to say thank you all for joining us for this conversation. We wanted to make sure to elevate not just the mission of communities and schools, which really is to ensure that students have everything that they need, many cases non-academic, to succeed in school and then to succeed in life. You've heard some of our leaders talk about that, and they are putting truth to that along with the leaders all across the country. But as Elmer pointed out correctly, it is a team behind them of site coordinators in the schools, field managers, and I, of course, at the national office rely on a team to put this together, to in fact even put these community chats together. So Sarah Boysen, Kevin Branch, Rashida, we send our love and our best for helping to put these community chats together. We will talk to you next month.